penal colonies in Stellaris. We're going to cover what they are, why we need them, how they work, and if they're going to be worth it. Let's get into it. So let's start with what are penal colonies. Well, I tend to think of them as space gulags, effectively a planet-wide prison without the prison necessarily. I think from an RP perspective, it's a really cool feature, and I'm really pleased it's in the game. If anyone is familiar with the book 13th Legion by Gav Thorpe, they discuss penal colonies in that a little bit. More or less what comes to mind when I think of penal colonies, and sort of the idea of it 100% resonates with me. And to note, that's not a sponsor thing, I just think it's a really cool book. Now to the why. So why is penal colonies a good idea or a bad idea? The idea of penal colonies is to reduce crime across your empire. Now, what does this mean in game? So in game, a penal colony translates to a minus 25 reduction of crime for every planet across your empire, with the exception of the world that you've designated a penal world. So if you have 10 planets across your empire, you conquer an 11th and you designate it a penal colony, the 10 planets that you had previously will all get a minus 25% reduction in crime. Pretty cool, right? You'll also, potentially bizarrely, depending on your viewpoint, get a 33% immigration pool to the penal world. Now, from an RP perspective, maybe that's because other empires decide to send their criminals to you. In any case, it results in an increase in pop growth for you on that planet, which I guess is never a bad thing. So how do we get them? Well, this is effectively the easy bit. You simply research penal colonies from your society tech tree. You must first have the prerequisite artificial moral codes, and bear in mind that penal colonies is a tier 3 rare tech, so you may not see it until you're a little bit way through the game. It's also worth noting that this tech is not available to you if you're playing as a Gestalt consciousness. You'll only be able to get it if you're playing as a regular empire. Okay, so on to the fundamental question, and really why you guys are here. Is it worth my time building a penal colony? Well, the answer is probably not. Pretty much 99% of the time, as long as your population is fed and has appropriate number of amenities, they're not going to become criminals. As an example, I have some worlds here to look at. So if we look at Terralis Prime, for example, we have 67 pops living on here, majority of which are human. We've got a couple aliens on there as well. As you can see, we've got no specific enforcer buildings, and we're running at 0 crime. And there's a couple of different reasons for that. So as you can see, we've got plus 57 crime from pops. So your pops do generate crime, but as long as you have the appropriate governor and potentially the appropriate pop jobs, it's never ever going to become an issue. So if we go to jobs, you can see that we have 3 enforcers. Now the enforcers are from this building here, the System Capital Complex building. So this building as a base gives you 3 enforcer jobs. Now for every enforcer that you have working, you get a minus 25 in crime. So depending on the size of your planet, 3 enforcers is probably all you're going to need, potentially. If we go back to that crime statistic, you can see we have plus 57 from pops and minus 75 from jobs. You also have the artificial moral codes, which you will have researched should you want to use a penal colony, as it's a prerequisite to it, which is why we only have 57 crime from pops. The other thing that you're going to have is a governor. Now this governor is a particularly good one. It's a skill level 9-1, and as you can see, she reduces crime by 27, which is a huge amount. The majority of the time you won't have a level 9 governor. In any case, they're going to reduce crime by some amount unless they become corrupted, in which case you can sack them off and get a new one. So this is a large planet. I mean, it only has 67 people on it, but it's a large planet. We have no issues with crime. If we look at, say, another planet, this has 90 people on it. We've got a couple of different alien species. Again, we have no crime. It's not an issue at all. And we only have 3 enforcers on this planet again. The only situation where I can imagine that you have high crime on lots of planets is when you are continuously invading planets and you don't give them enough time to stabilize post invasion. So as an example, we have on here in this playthrough, I have just conquered some Fallen Empire planets. So, I mean, one of them is occupied, as you can see. But if we go to Celestial Throne, we have 100% crime. Now, why is that? Well, we have a lot of unhappy pops. We only have 2 enforcers, so we're only getting a 50 reduction in crime. But the main reason is we have 34 workers unemployed. Now, unemployed workers are much more likely to fall into crime for obvious reasons, and as such we have generated the criminal underworld debuff, and that's why we have so much crime. So we have 4 criminals, sorry. So each of those criminals attributes 33 planet crime, and as you can see, our crime is through the roof. The only reason that this is the case is because I've conquered the planet and then I've not spent the time to sort out the worker unemployment, which has led to crime. If you were to sort that out properly, you would never have this issue. And as you can see, the other worlds, this one is an exception because it's being wrecked by the unbidden. As you can see, some of these other worlds where I haven't bothered to properly manage them have crime. But as long as you properly manage them, it's really not going to be an issue. But in this case, a penal world may be useful because I have all these planets that I've not bothered to manage properly, and we want to reduce the crime. So if I was to designate one of them a penal world, it would bring down the crime by 25% across all of these planets. Maybe that's a good thing. As I said, if you spend the time, if I was to put these guys into a proper sector and assign them a governor, it's really not going to be an issue. And it's just going to take time, particularly if you're purging some of the population, which you may or may not be doing. So moving on to the best case for a penal colony, should you wish to use one. I'm not saying it's a bad thing, it's just not a super necessary thing. So should you wish to use one, what I would do is use it as a fortress world. So when I say fortress world, what I mean is like a buffer world, a defensive world. So for example, if we use the Capella system as an example and pretend this had a planet. Now, all of our core worlds are up here, and we have an entrance, say, look, the unbidden are coming this way. If this world had a planet, I would turn this planet into a fortress world because it's going to offer some sort of a buffer from enemy ships getting into my core worlds, because what you'll find is they will stop and they will bombard the planet before moving on. The reason that I would turn my penal world into one of these fortress worlds is because the enforcer buildings or the enforcer jobs provide defense armies. So for every enforcer job, you get 2 planetary defense armies. So they are doubling up as soldiers, in which case you will build 4 or 5 enforcer buildings to keep the overall crime down on the planet, because remember, the penal planet will get 100% increase to crime. So you're going to have to build some precinct houses to keep the overall crime down. So you can say have 4 or 5 precinct houses and then fill the remaining slots with your army worlds, so with your strongholds, for example. Or, you know, you have a military academy and then you fill it up with strongholds. Well, I hope that's given you a insight into penal colonies and whether or not they are right for your empire. I hope you enjoyed. If you want to learn about hyper relays, please click the video on screen now.